Hey, this is Dave, and I'm just doing a little video about Star Wars The Force Awakens. And what I'm going to do here is I've combined all the clips from the trailers that we've had, and I've put them in what I think might be chronological order for the film. And so I'm going to go through it and also just kind of describe my idea of what the plot might be that ties these clips together. Probably not spoilers, but if I happen to be right on some of this stuff, then maybe there'll be some spoilers. Anyway, here we go. Alright, so I think the movie's going to start off with a battle where we're going to see the First Order and attacking either some village or some base. And I think Poe Dameron is already going to be there, and we're going to have stormtroopers there. Finn's going to be amongst them. Also, Kylo Ren is going to be there, and Captain Phasma. Of course, the reason that they're actually landing and attacking and not just bombing the crap out of it is because they're there to take prisoners. And so Poe's going to get captured and taken prisoner on the Star Destroyer. After that point, we'll probably cut to Jakku, and we'll get a little introduction to a day in the life of Rey as a scavenger. But one thing I want to mention now, if you look at the poster, we see the Death Star-like StarKiller-based weapon. A lot of people are wondering, is the First Order making a whole new Death Star or whatever? I'm going to theorize that hasn't been constructed recently, that is something that was already made a long time ago and has been hidden inside that snow planet, and that it's probably something that was created by Darth Plagueis back in the day. Now, if you remember from Episode 3, Palpatine talks about Darth Plagueis the Wise, the Sith Lord that was able to learn how to cheat death. Apparently, Plagueis is actually Palpatine's master. And there's a lot of rumors that Supreme Leader Snoke, played by Andy Serkis, is actually Darth Plagueis, which I'm kind of thinking is true at this point. But anyways, the reason I'm emphasizing Darth Plagueis is if you look at Rey's staff that she carries around with her everywhere she goes, you compare it to a staff that we commonly see Plagueis holding. It looks pretty similar. So my theory is that staff, and also perhaps something hidden inside of BB-8 that everybody's been talking about, that staff is necessary for activating the StarKiller base and meant only to be used by Darth Plagueis, and so his staff is the key. That's why it's such an important thing, and I think Rey is maybe actually hiding out on this planet to protect that staff, and maybe she doesn't even know why, since she seems to not really know what's going on when she's talking to Han Solo in the later clip. So we get just a little glimpse of her, a little introduction to her and her life. We'll go back to the Star Destroyer, where Kylo Ren will be probing Poe Dameron's mind, trying to find Rey. Now, I think perhaps Poe might be one of the only ones who knows where Rey is. It's been suggested that they have a relationship, and that BB-8 is actually Poe's droid. And I think maybe if she has gone into hiding with that staff, perhaps Poe was the one who dropped her off on Jakku. Maybe for security reasons, he's the only one who actually knows where she is. And now I think he's going to get probed by Kylo Ren, and even though he tries his hardest to resist, that Kylo Ren is going to be able to get that information out of him, that Rey is hiding out on Jakku. And so then they set a course for Jakku, which is of course why when Finn escapes later, they're within Jakku's atmosphere because they're headed there. So they head there, but now coming to Finn has witnessed some atrocities, and he's disillusioned with the First Order. And I think one of the big reasons is probably because he is in touch with the Force, and so perhaps the Force is communicating to him that he needs to leave, and this is not the right thing for him, which can make sense because you'd think if it was just like, I feel bad about all this, you'd think there'd be a whole lot more stormtroopers defecting. The fact that he is in tune with the Force is something that's motivating him to leave. So he's reached his breaking point, and he knows that it's time for him to do something, and so I think he's actually going to perhaps set Poe free. Now, we've seen when Poe is taken captive in that other clip, we see that he's wearing an identical jacket to the jacket that we see Finn wearing throughout the rest of the movie. So what I think happens is he sets Poe free, and Poe, knowing that Kylo has figured out where Rey is, Rey needs to be warned now, and so he's going to ask Finn that when he escapes, that he tries to get to Jakku to warn Rey, and that Rey will help him. But in order for Rey to trust Finn and know that the message is from Poe, he's going to give him his jacket that she will be able to recognize. And now it's quite a coincidence that all these people seem to show up, the First Order shows up, and that Finn happens to just escape right in Jakku's atmosphere. And then all of a sudden Han Solo seems to show up at that time with the Millennium Falcon. The fact that he's there with the Millennium Falcon is interesting because we see that clip where he enters the Millennium Falcon and he says that line, Chewie, we're home, as if he hasn't been on that ship for a while. So I think that he's actually a prisoner on that same Death Star, Kylo Ren's Death Star, and that Poe leaves Finn to escape, and he knows that Han is on that Death Star, and he goes to rescue Han. He ends up freeing Han and Chewie, who then make their way to the Falcon, which is being held also in the Death Star hangar. And Han probably tells Poe that he's going to go try to save Rey, and that Poe needs to head back, probably to the Resistance base. And so that's where we'll come to him entering the Millennium Falcon. But meanwhile, on Jakku, Finn manages to find Rey. They just have to quickly decide to trust each other because TIE fighters are on their way. So now they're just fleeing for their lives, and of course Han Solo ends up showing up to save the day. So then they all get into the Millennium Falcon and go on their adventure. Now there's probably going to be a lot of stuff in between all these events because the trailer hardly gave us a lot, but Han and Rey and Finn go on their adventure, and essentially I think they're just going to be looking for Luke. So I think they're going to make their way to visit this Kanata person who's supposed to be some kind of pirate or something, and I think it's because she has Luke's lightsaber, the one that was lost in Empire Strikes Back when Luke got his hand cut off. The only thing I can figure of why that would be so important is perhaps there might be the idea of someone in tune with the Force, like perhaps Rey or Finn, being able to touch the lightsaber and through the Force do some kind of psychometry, which is the whole thing where psychics will touch an object and become in tune with that object's owner or something like that. So maybe there'll be a similar type of thing that they do using the Force to become in tune with Luke. Or maybe quite simply Maz Kanata knows of Luke's whereabouts. Either way, so I think they're going to end up making their way to this temple-looking thing. I'm kind of leaning towards the idea that this is actually where Luke is. It's really kind of shrouded at this point what's going to happen with that, but what does look apparent is that the First Order does show up, and it looks like they bomb the crap out of that temple, which leads us to this scene where Han and Chewie and Finn have their hands up and they're surrendering. What might be happening is Han and Chewie and Finn, they go out to surrender, while Rey and possibly Luke flee to try to escape with the staff. It's somewhere in that point where they split up that Kylo Ren will get to Rey and take her to the First Order headquarters. But meanwhile, Han and Chewie and Finn are there, and we see in the shot it looks like they're looking off in the distance at something, and I think that that's going to be Poe and his X-Wing fighters showing up as backup to save the day, and so they have a sneak attack. That's where we see this battle that seems to take place in this same kind of area. That's where they rescue Han and Chewie and Finn, and they get taken back to the Resistance headquarters. Meanwhile, it's not really seen in the trailers, but I do think Rey is captured at some point, and I think that, of course, there probably is this relationship between Kylo and her, whether or not that's they're twins or siblings or cousins, yet to be seen, but I think they do have a relationship, and Kylo is going to be trying to persuade her to the dark side, and she might even be presented before Supreme Leader Snoke or Darth Plagueis. Even if he's not Darth Plagueis, I think we might see him at this point. And so they get the staff that's needed for the StarKiller base, and so now they're ready to enact their plans. Back at Resistance, they're getting ready to launch their attack because they know what's happened. Now, as what happened to Luke, I'm not sure, maybe he just ends up following from the shadows, and he ends up on the snow planet as well. So anyways, it all ends up on this snow planet where the Resistance is launching their attack, and eventually we're going to get some battle on the planet surface itself. Kylo going up against Finn. I think what's going to happen is Finn is going to be beaten, and I think perhaps Han will show up to help him, maybe Han and Chewie, at which point Han will become mortally wounded, sustain wounds that are going to later kill him, which is what perhaps this scene is of Rey crying. And there's a lot of rumors about this jacket and what looks like hair in the bottom right corner. That hair, I'm going to say, is probably Chewie's fur, and I think what's going on is Han's head is being cradled by Chewie. So I think Finn probably being injured and Han being injured, Rey is probably going to pick up the lightsaber and go after the bad guys, at which point we might see Luke emerge as well, and I think it'll be kind of a Luke and Rey against Snoke and Kylo Ren. Now, this is maybe a little bit spoilery. I don't know if you've seen this concept art, but there is some concept art of Rey with the lightsaber and a Sith figure in the background who doesn't really look like Kylo Ren, so I think that that's actually Supreme Leader Snoke, who coincidentally looks a lot like Darth Plagueis. I kind of get the feeling that this isn't a final battle, that Kylo and Snoke, they get into the Star Destroyer once the StarKiller base is activated, because I think it's inside the planet, and activating it is going to probably obliterate the planet's surface. And then we're going to get some stuff going on with the StarKiller base doing some destruction, and then we're going to get a whole other ending that I don't think we've seen like anything from yet, where they have to try to stop it. Finally, there's this one scene that is apparently probably Luke. We see the robotic hand, and I think that is Luke, and I think that scene is part of a funeral scene. We see what looks like kind of glowing embers coming from the left side of the screen, and Luke looks like he's bowed with his head down, and he's putting his hand up on R2 in sort of a comforting manner. And so I think that this is a funeral, probably Han Solo's funeral, maybe not, but I'm kind of guessing that it is, and that he's being burned kind of like Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi. And maybe even that's like the final part of the whole movie is a funeral for Han and tribute to him. And so that's kind of my theory of what could be the plot that moves this movie along. Let me know what you guys think about what we've seen in the trailers. If you like this video, go ahead and click the thumbs up, and thanks.